Welcome to Geometric Virtual Learning. In today's lesson, we'll be learning about how to draw quadratic graphs. As usual, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to this channel, share with your friends, and hit the notification button. Thank you. So today we'll talk about how to draw quadratic graphs without using calculator. Then we'll also learn how to use calculator to calculate our values to draw quadratic graphs, and also how to find roots or solutions of quadratic graphs. Let's first have a talk about features of quadratic graphs. Quadratic graphs typically has a function y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. It's called quadratic because the highest power of x is 2. That's why it's quadratic graph. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to have all this format. What is important is the x squared that determines that it's a quadratic graph. Now, quadratic graphs, unlike linear graphs, are curves. Quadratic graphs will always give you a curve. Now, when the coefficient of x squared, the a value, when the coefficient of x squared is positive, you have a U-shaped graph. Your graph will be like a U shape. And when the coefficient of a is negative, it's going to be an upside down. So the U-shaped one is when coefficient of x squared is positive, and the upside down is when a or the coefficient of x squared is negative. So these are checkpoints to help you know whether you got it right or wrong. So let's look at an example, but first without using calculator in calculating our values. So we have y equals x squared plus 2x minus 2. And you're supposed to draw the graph on this grid. Normally in an exam, when you get this kind of question, you just create your own x coordinates. From the graph, we have negative 3 to 2. So I have to create my own x coordinate from negative 3 to 2. And because I'm not going to use calculator, I'm going to try to have a row for each of the terms. So I have 3 terms to make y, x squared plus 2x and minus 2. So each of the terms will have a row. That's what I've just done. And I'll just calculate each of the rows and just sum them up vertically to give me my y. So the first I need to do is to find the row x squared. What would that be? I need to square each of the x's. And negative times negative is positive. So on the x squared row, all should be positive numbers. So just square each of the numbers. So these are my square numbers. The row for 2x, you have to multiply 2 by each of the x values. Remember, negative and positive, when you multiply, is negative. So you got to be mindful of that. Times each of these numbers by 2 for the 2x row. The negative 2 is a constant, so it doesn't change with x. So it's going to repeat negative 2 throughout. Now, once you've done that, because y is made up of x squared, 2x, and minus 2, I'm going to do what we call vertical summation. I'm just going to add them up, and that will give me y. You got to be mindful of your negative numbers. So this column, when you add, you're going to have 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1. 1 and 6. And then from there, you just plot them as coordinate. In plotting the coordinate, you only concentrate on the x and the y coordinate. The middle bits are working out. It's only the x and y coordinate you plot. So let's plot negative 3 and 1 on the grid. Done. Negative 2, and so on. At the end, join with a smooth curve. So this is a quadratic graph. Sometimes you may be asked to find out the minimum turning point. As you can see, this is the minimum turning point. So if they want you to find the minimum turning point, you just have to state the coordinate of that point, and that will be -3, -1, -3. The minimum turning point of this graph is -1, -3. So this is how you create your own table for quadratic graph when you are now allowed to use calculator. Okay, next we're going to learn when using the calculator. So we have 2x squared minus 3x minus 4. Let's check one more thing back. This is the intercept. -2 is the intercept. So we check and see if the graph cut the y-axis -2. That's the y-axis, -2. Correct. Second check, the coefficient of x squared is +1. So it should be a U-shaped, also U-shaped. So that's something that you must always check to verify your answer. Okay, let's move on. We're supposed to draw the graph of y equals 2x squared minus 3x minus 4. Most of the time they will give you a table. If you are not given a table, then create your own x coordinate. They give you a table and they give you some of the values. Now what happens is that because we have negative values for the x, if you don't set the calculator up properly, you may input the wrong numbers and you get the y values wrong. So what I suggest you do is that you try to set up the calculator according to this format. All your s coordinate must be in bracket like this. So you should see 2 into bracket something squared minus 3 into bracket something minus 4. That something is your x values. So I'm going to start with -2. I'll replace the x with -2. When I work that out, that gives me +10. Now all I need to do is use the cursor, go back and only change the -2 into -1, and I press equal sign. That will give me 1. I'll go again and change the bracket number to 0. So you keep doing that. That will give you -4, and 1 will give you -5, and 3 will give you 5. So remember, set the calculator right and only put in the x values, and that will always give you right answer. One way is that when you set it up, use it to try the given answers first. So use 0 to verify if you're going to get -4. Use 2 to verify if you're going to get -2. Once that confirmation is done, then it means you've set the calculator right. Then you can now continue. We plot the coordinate -2, 10 on the grid, -1, 1, and so on. Join with a smooth curve. So that's our graph. Let's do some checkpoint. It's a +2 coefficient of x squared, so it has to be U-shaped. Done. Intercept is -4. On the y-axis, -4. Checked. So we are done now. Right. Next one, we have y equals -2x squared minus 2x plus 3. We're supposed to plot that. Let's set the calculator up properly. So this is how it's going to be like. Your s values must be in bracket. Let's try with -3 and see what happens. But before that, confirm with -1 and see if you're going to get 3. Confirm with 1 and see if you're going to get -1. If that confirmation is done, it means your setup is right. You can now change the values in the bracket and use each of the x's. Now -3. You can try it yourself and see if you got it right. This is how it's going to look like on the calculator. So -9 for -2. -1 for 0, 3 for 2, -9. Then let's plot -3, -9, -2, -1, and so on. Join with the smooth curve. Let's do some checkpoint. Coefficient of x squared is -2, so it should be upside down. Checked. The intercept is +3, so on the y-axis crosses at +3, also checked, so we are right. Okay, now let's look at, we are supposed to use the graph to find the values of x for which -2x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals -4. When question like this is given to you, double check the original function. Minus 2x squared is still minus 2x squared. Minus 2x is still minus 2x. Plus 3 is still plus 3. And this whole thing equals y. And this whole thing is exactly what is here. So we can just say y is equals to negative 4. So which means we're going to draw a line to represent y equals negative 4, because this whole thing here represents y. And that is the graph or line that you need to draw. Then from there you can now find the values of your x. So you're going to draw y equals negative 4. That's our line for y equals negative 4. Once you've drawn that line, then where you hit the graph, trace it perpendicularly up to the x-axis to read your values. So we can see the values are negative 2.5 and x is also equals 1.5. Now, if they say find the roots or the solution of the equation, is exactly when y is equal to 0. That one you read it at this point. So remember, roots of the graph or the solution of the graph is when y is equal to 0. They will just say this is equal to 0. That's the roots. Okay, now let's look at another question. Here we have already drawn quadratic graph y equals negative 2x squared minus 2x plus 3. And we are supposed to draw a graph of y equals 2x minus 3 on the same grid. And from there we're going to use this to write down the values for which this graph will be equal to 2x minus 3. Find the values of x. Okay. Now, if you've done your linear graph properly, you know this is a linear graph. This is going to be a straight line. And in an exam, you don't need to spend time to do table before you can do a linear graph. Linear graph is a straight line, could be done with 2 or 3 points. So what I suggest you do is that choose any coordinate for x to find your y coordinate, choose another to find your y coordinate. With these 2 points, that is enough. So you just need 2 or 3 points to do that. So I'll just choose one point, negative 2. It's a matter of choice. So I've chosen x to be equals to negative 2. I'm using a calculator, so it's not difficult. I substitute negative 2 into 2x minus 3. That will give me negative 7. That is the y. So the coordinate is negative 2, negative 7. Choose another x coordinate. I've chosen 0. It will give me a y coordinate of negative 3. So the next coordinate is 0 and negative 3. With these 2 points, it's enough to draw a straight line. So I'm going to plot that. Negative 2, negative 7. And now I have my straight line. So if I want to know the values for which values of x for which minus 2x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 2x minus 3, it's where my straight line crosses the quadratic graph. And it crosses at 2 points. That's point and that point. So I'm going to trace it up and just read the numbers. So my first answer, negative 3. Second answer, positive 1. So which means these are the values for x for which negative 2x squared minus 2x plus 1 will be equal to 2x plus 1. And you can check and save by substituting negative 3 into this expression, negative 3, and you see they'll be equal. You can substitute also 1 into this expression, into that, and you see they'll be equal. Right. Now, it's very important that you know how to manipulate quadratic expressions to create a new equation to draw. So a new equation to know the kind of line to draw to find out or estimate values of x. So I'm going to explain to you how do you manipulate expressions to understand the sort of line to draw to find solutions. So here we've been given y equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. If this graph is drawn and you are given x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 3, and they ask you to find out the values of x that will make this equals to 3, the values of x that will make it equal to 5, and so on, what sort of line will you draw on the quadratic graph to determine your answer? Like the one we did here. How do you come by your line to draw? So that's what I'm going to show you. So first thing is, check what is given to you. We are trying to create y, which is x squared minus 2x minus 3. So we check. S squared is still the same as s squared. Nothing changes. Minus 2x is the same as minus 2x. So nothing changes. But minus 3, we have 1. So we need to create something to make sure the plus 1 becomes minus 3. So you check one by one and see what needs to change. Plus 1 needs to change to become minus 3. How do you do that? By taking away 4. And because this is an equation, whatever you do to one side, do the same to the other side. So I've done that. Now you remember that once you do minus 4 on the left hand side, the whole thing now becomes exactly what you see here. So you don't need to rearrange it. You know that what you've done actually represents y. So that represents y. Then what will 3 minus 4 also represent? So now you know the line you need to draw is y equals -1 on the graph. Then you trace your values. So here you draw y equals -1, and I'm sure you know how to draw y equals -1 on the graph. And you estimate your values. Let's look at the second one. S squared is the same as x squared. But x is not the same as minus 2x. -3 is the same as -3. So what you change is the x. We need to make sure x becomes -2x. So what can we do to x to become -2x? We take away 3x, because 1x minus 3x is -2x. Do the same to the other side. Okay. Now we know what we've done on the left hand side makes the whole expression equals to x squared minus 2x minus 3, which represent what? Y. So you can represent the whole thing here by y. Now this becomes an expression, 5 minus 3x, and therefore I'm going to draw a linear graph of y equals 5 minus 3x. So you need to draw a straight line graph, 5 minus 3x. Let's look at the final one. X squared is the same as x squared. But minus 4x isn't the same as minus 2x. And minus 5 isn't the same as minus 3. So we have two things to change here. So let's start with the minus 4x. How do we make minus 4x become -2x? Oh, sorry, let's start with the minus 3. Whichever way, it doesn't really matter. So, to make minus 5 or -5 become -3, I add 2 to -5. Do the same to the other side. How do I make -4x become -2x? By adding 2x. Do the same to the other side. Okay. Now we know everything I have here represents y, because that's what I've tried to manipulate the expression to become. Now you need to simplify this. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 plus 2x is 6 plus 2x. So I have the left hand side is y. That is 6 plus 2x. So the line I need to draw is a linear graph of y equals 6 plus 2x. So this is how you learn how to manipulate expressions to know the sort of line to draw for solutions on a quadratic graph. So that brings us to the end of the lesson on quadratic graphs. Hope you've enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel and share with your friends. And look forward to lesson 2 on cubic graphs. Thank you very much.